So I had this crazy idea to ride the beautiful coast of Florida on my motorcycle and document those locations and my experience. This video is episode 7 of that journey and the conclusion of my trip. It was a very impactful trip for me personally, spending time with the bike in all of these beautiful places and all the challenges. I wanted to share some of the highlights of my trip and some of the obstacles I encountered along the way. So I have ridden for many years in my life, but not too many long-haul trips. I've done the Dolomites in Italy a couple of times. Traveled up into Berlin, Germany. And I did a big East Coast loop a few years ago. But nothing this ambitious. Traveling to Key West on motorcycle is, of course, a bucket list trip for all bikers, but what's the fun of traveling the interstate all the way down? I wanted something more interesting, more content, and also to be able to document my journey along the way. I consider myself a baby YouTuber, having started a channel, and I've made about 75 videos so far, mainly about my travels and wonderful adventures in Baja California Sur, Mexico. So I do have some background putting together and editing YouTube videos, but that has not prepared me for this challenge very well. I won't be getting too much into the filming and video production aspect of the trip, but lots of challenges and personal growth there as well. So this video will be organized into a couple of sections. First, I'll talk about my preparations, getting myself, my bike ready. Next, talk about some of those challenges I encountered along the way. After that, some of my top memories and highlights of the trip around Florida's beautiful coast. Next, what would I do differently? And finally, conclusion and some reflections. So that's it. I hope you enjoy the video. Of course, please like and subscribe if you're enjoying this content. So as I mentioned, I really wanted to try to avoid the interstates as much as possible, and therefore, at least heading down the East Coast, I was focused on A1A and US 1. These are beautiful roads that are adjacent to the Atlantic Ocean, and was able to take them a good part of the way down the coast. There are some areas, especially around large cities like Miami, for example, where it's just not feasible to continue on the coastal route. So there were times when I jumped on the Florida Turnpike, for example, or short sprints on the interstate to get around some of those areas. The West Coast is a little more difficult. It's a little more chopped up, and I did make my way up as best as possible around the West Coast and avoiding areas around Tampa. I didn't do any moto camping on the way, but rather I stayed in hotels. I used a great app called Hotel Tonight, which you can use to find last-minute hotel deals. So typically I wouldn't book my hotel until 5 o'clock in the evening when I was getting close to my stopping point for the day. Of course, I spent the time to get my bike ready. I had it serviced, had brake fluid changed, had everything checked over to make sure that it was in good operating condition with my local BMW Motorrad dealer in Charleston, South Carolina. With regard to packing, I did take a basic set of tools with me, which included wrenches, screwdrivers, star bits, etc. that would be most common. Actually found a nice cruise toolkit on Amazon that I purchased. Also found a battery-operated tire inflator, also a tire repair kit. So I have tubeless tires on my BMW R1200GS, and wanted to make sure that I had a way to be able to recover from a flat tire if that were needed. With regard to clothes, I did take my BMW rally jacket, which was very heavy, jacket also has a number of vents you can open up along the way, especially along the sleeves and in the chest. Also wore the BMW 5 pocket jeans. They're a little bit lighter than the BMW rally pants, and I didn't think I would need the rally pants for what I would be doing. Also wore my Forma Adventure boots. Those are the high top boots to provide foot protection. Also, I had a number of cameras, GoPro cameras, video cameras, my drone, computer, etc., that I also packed up with me on the bike. So got all that together and pretty much had a set location for each of those things and kept that consistent throughout the trip. So with regard to route planning, I did use the Garmin Basecamp app, and I do have on my bike the Garmin Navigator 6, which I'm able to prepare my routes in Basecamp and then download them to the Navigator, to the GPS. So that worked out fairly well. Made sure that I had the latest maps and software updates on my GPS to make sure that it was ready to go. So that was it. I spent probably 4 or 5 months route planning and also getting everything ready, and to anticipate the trip, to plan that late March when I left. So that's the preparation phase that I went through. So in general, I wanted to ride about 6 to 8 hours a day. So some of the overnight stops became natural break points along the way. For example, Daytona Beach, West Palm Beach, Punta Gorda, etc. Some of those became pretty natural places to stop. Next section I'd like to discuss is challenges along the way, things that I had to deal with while I was on the road. And the first one is, as a senior biker, is just aches and pains. Probably back pain was one of the main topics, so tried to manage that along with wrist pain. And really Aleve became my best friend along with BioFreeze. So in addition to that, unfortunately, I suffered a foot injury when I was traveling between Punta Gorda and Crystal River. Was getting on the bike, typically step up with my left foot on the left peg and then swing my foot over, and somehow in that process pivoting, I felt a pop in my left foot, and it was very painful to put any weight on. And so that's kind of difficult because you're not only trying to support yourself, but support the weight of the bike, which my bike was fairly loaded down with everything that I mentioned previously. Certainly that created some challenges for me, especially as I was coming up the West Coast. Another challenge is I think I had too ambitious of an agenda. I think I should have probably broken it up into smaller sections that were maybe a little bit more manageable, or allowing more rest time in between, I think would have been a good way to go. I think in general it was too ambitious. The other thing that I underestimated was some of the big cities and getting around them. And Miami, for example, even though I was trying to bypass Miami on the Florida Turnpike, there were still several major standstill traffic jams, and I probably lost about an hour and a half just waiting in traffic, sitting on the pavement. And this is about the point where the weather was certainly getting much warmer. And I think also with regard to the weather, there certainly was some unsettling weather that was coming through Mississippi and into the Florida Panhandle, that between the weather and the situation with my left foot, I made the decision to start making my way back home. Though I didn't make it completely around, my original idea was to try to make it to Pensacola or Destin, some of those areas. That was my original plan, was to do the entire East and West Coast. I was only able to do about 3/4 of the way before I ended up turning toward home from Crystal River back northeast. So, and I think, maybe another Another challenge was I did think that I would be able to edit and produce some of my videos while I was on the road, and what I found out was that basically too much time on the bike really wasn't able to do that. I end up in the situation where I ended up with a backlog of videos to produce. Those were some of the challenges that I was faced with and had to overcome along the way. So I hope that makes sense for you. I'd love any comments or questions that you might have about those topics. In this part of the video, I'd like to talk about some of my favorite memories from the trip, and I'd like to do it kind of in a chronological order as I experienced them. First would be Northeast Florida and A1A, and this would be coming down from the Fernandina Beach area in through St. Augustine. Basically some beautiful areas. There are some beautiful parks right along the Atlantic and beautiful views out over the coast. So that was certainly one thing that I really enjoyed. Next is riding through the Keys. I always enjoy the Florida Keys, but this was special on the bike. Definitely going through a lot of the little towns, the Keys, the islands, and getting a view on both sides of the Atlantic on one side and the Gulf of Mexico on the other. You see it in the changes in the color of the water, and that's really when you know you're getting down to a special place in a special area. And I think part of that is also all of the bridges, and I would include 7 Mile Bridge in that general list of bridges that I crossed. I think that there are over 40 bridges in the Florida Keys. Another beautiful bridge was the Damas Point Bridge in Jacksonville. Had to go over that. That was really cool. Next is Key West. I really enjoy Key West. I try to get there at least one time a year and seeing all the sights and seeing everything. And it's really a thriving tourist economy, but also just a very special place, being on the southernmost point of the United States and some of the special things that there are to see there. So I did a video just specifically on Key West and what some of my recommendations are of things you should do when you visit Key West. Next would be the Everglades. This is really the first time I've passed through the Everglades, and looking at some of the ecosystem and some of the research I did about the Everglades National Park and the importance of the ecosystem. So that's certainly something that is worth seeing and worth taking a look at. Really impressed me. Next was a little beach that the hotel manager told me about. He was a motorcycle rider, and he said that I would really enjoy that, and I did. And it's a little place called Blind Pass Beach. It's really a crook in the road. Beautiful little area. Manasota Key is the name of the island that it's located on, and would definitely recommend that. Next would be Crystal River, and I've known about Crystal River, but really the first time that I've stayed there, and it ended up being a little bit of a spontaneous decision to stay there, kind of based on the situation with my foot. I needed to find some place to rest and relax a little bit and recoup. Crystal River was the place, and it turned out to be a real gem. It's known for its colonies of manatees that are in the area, and there's quite a tourist trade of boats that will take people out to swim and interact with the manatees. So I really enjoyed my time there. Got a chance to fly my drone to get some great shots. Really enjoyed that. And then just before I came home back here to Charleston, I stayed in St. Mary's, Georgia. I've been there before. Beautiful little waterfront town on the St. Mary's River. Really a great place. A lot of super little seafood restaurants. Nice little quaint town, and would definitely recommend that. And I think the final thing that I really enjoyed, that was one of my top memories, is riding home in the rain. A little bit of rain on the way. Fortunately, it wasn't too heavy. No bike trip would be complete without riding in the rain, so really enjoyed that. Those were some of my top memories of my trip, and would ask what some of your memories might be, and if there are some other places on here maybe that I didn't mention that you would recommend. So I'd love to hear from you. The next section of the video here is what I would do different. And I think the first thing that I have to realize as a senior biker is that I really need more bike training to condition myself, and really longer miles to put the time in on the bike to condition my body and to get used to it. So this is not an issue of getting my bike ready. I think my bike has no problem. My bike did extremely well over the whole course of the trip. It's more about conditioning my body. As I mentioned earlier, just the situation with back pain, wrist pain, neck pain from the buffeting of my helmet, and then also ultimately with the injury to my foot. I think I can do more to condition myself to have a better experience on the bike overall, so to enjoy it more. The next point is to maybe have a less ambitious agenda. I think to try to have more of a balance of time on the bike and time exploring, rest days really to explore some of the local areas and to wander around, to take video, to take photos, to enjoy the local environment and the situation, to put more context for me into all of these local areas. So that's a key takeaway for me, is a less ambitious agenda and to enjoy the time in all these locations. I did have a little bit of a time pressure. I had some events and some situations that I had to return to that was always looming in the back of my mind a little bit, that put a artificial time constraint on everything that I was doing. So that would definitely be a point of something that I would do different. The next point has to do maybe with some of the video production behind this. That is that I really need to do a much better job with what they call B-roll, which is not necessarily the camera pointed at you, but basically the general situation that you're dealing with, to give more context of how things are developing. And that's really an art, something that I need to work on. I think would have added a lot more depth to the videos that I've been able to produce, is by making more B-roll content and being able to provide that to you. So that's definitely something that I want to improve. And the last point I would mention also deals with kind of the video production side of things a little bit, and that's I consistently struggle with onboard audio. So with my helmet, I've tried really multiple microphones, and at the end of the day, I'm really not satisfied with the quality of the audio that's coming out. Therefore, you don't hear a lot from me on the bike. And I definitely want to try to improve that and try to improve the experience of recording and documenting what I'm going through. So those would be 4 quick points that I would think of that I really want to try to work to be better with, to basically to do different for my next bike trip. So in conclusion, I have to say that I really enjoyed the trip. It was really a memorable occasion. My schedule was way too aggressive. I really should have scheduled more down days in between. And as an anecdote, I'm surprised by the questions that I get about my bike. A lot of people don't realize that BMW makes motorcycles. And why do the cylinders stick out to the side? So I gladly answer all these questions and inform them about the wonderful technology that the BMW GSs possess. And finally, there's something truly special about hitting the open road on a bike. The wind in your face, the hum of the engine beneath you, and the feeling of freedom that comes with every twist and turn of the road that is truly exhilarating. Riding a motorcycle is more than just a mode of transportation. It's a way of life. When you're on a bike, you're completely immersed in the experience. You feel every bump in the road, every change in the weather, and every shift in the terrain. You're not just a passenger, you're an active participant in the journey. But perhaps the greatest joy of riding a motorcycle is the sense of community it fosters. Whether you're a lone rider exploring the countryside or part of a larger group of riders, there's a sense of camaraderie that comes with the motorcyclist. You're part of a unique subculture, one that values adventure, freedom, and the open road. So if you haven't yet experienced the joys of riding a motorcycle, I urge you to give it a try. It just may change your life. And for those of you that already know the thrill of the ride, keep on cruising, my friends. The road ahead is waiting.